Today, on Be Something Wonderful, keep your desires and wishes to yourself. Here's why. I am your host, Tom Karen, and this is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Creators, welcome back. I had a new client last night that said that she's been just recently introduced to this whole idea of metaphysically creating your own reality. She always was on the fringes of it. And she says, you know, Tom, I was into tarot cards and psychic readings and all of these things that you say is a idol or a god or a power outside of me. And so I really wanted to book a session to ask you some questions on that. So we talked about a lot of things. And one of the questions that she came up is that one of her friends who's a tarot reader said, don't talk about your desires or what you want because you're going to jinx yourself. You know, you're going to sabotage them by talking about them. And she goes, I just don't understand that. What does that mean? I thought that when we're creating our own reality, we're supposed to live in the end. We're supposed to talk as if we are that person and match our inner talking and our outer talking with that. Well, guys, we're going to unpack these ideas today and more. Here's what the great master said, Jesus, when he did many of his healings. He would say the same thing. He would say something like, go and tell no one. Tell no one who I am. Tell no one of this miracle or this manifestation, right? Or tell no one of this, right? And then this is what he says in Mark 1:44. See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priests and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded in Mark 1:44. What was Jesus getting at to tell no one? Here's what Jesus knew. He knew that if you haven't risen yet to that state of consciousness of your wish fulfilled, if you're not occupying that new version of yourself, a new reality, if you're not already there, then when you go out and talk about it, talk about manifesting it, in other words, talk about the healing that you just had, or talk about something this power that you have about manifesting, you're going to create doubt. Others are going to doubt you. You're going to start doubting yourself. You're going to get into this feeling that you're going to have to prove it now, right? And you're not honoring the Sabbath. So if you manifest, that's the other thing. If you're manifesting something, you're not honoring the Sabbath, where you're in that silent time of resting in fulfillment. And then all the doubting thoughts start coming from that greater subconscious, right? That's part of it. Right? And remember, in this particular healing in Mark 1:44, he healed a man of leprosy. So he cleansed them. Remember, leprosy in this case represents impure thoughts, or in other words, negative or opposing thoughts of non-fulfillment. Doubt or fear that it's not going to happen. Right? Doubt, worry, fear, attachment. Those are the opposing thoughts. Once you occupy a state, or once you declare a wish, once you declare a desire, that you're still in the process of imagining it, of persisting in it, right? That these opposite thoughts come up, right? And then it shows that how Jesus, the I am, is healing those thoughts, right? As you maintain your wish fulfilled, right? Remember, leprosy is contagious. Just like those thoughts, right? Thoughts of worry, fear, attachment are contagious. Those subconscious beliefs, those thoughts and assumptions that you believe is true. That's what they're talking about there. And those come up when you go and start telling it. You start returning. Maybe you did manifest something. Maybe you were able to manifest the money you wanted, or the house you wanted, or the version of yourself that you want to be. But unless you have created that structure of consciousness underneath it, as you tell others about it from a 3D personality perspective, right? That now you're not maintaining that fulfillment. Now you're not standing in that new reality, and and then doubts are allowed to creep in. It's not until you're really feeling that this is my new state of reality that you can talk about it, but you're not going to. You're not going to talk about it like from a 3D standpoint, like I manifested this or I created this. Instead, what Jesus is saying here is go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded. In other words, give thanks to that higher power. Recognize and acknowledge that it's not you that's manifesting it. It's not you that's creating that new version of yourself. It's that higher you, that higher power. So he's warning of the dangers of getting caught up in the 3D personality, of going and telling people what you're creating and what you're desiring and how you can create this or create that. Big warnings here, right? Because like leprosy, that represents those thoughts. It's contagious and more thoughts come. So let's get at this a little more. The command go means to go within and acknowledge the true source of your power to manifest and create your own reality, your experience. Go and tell no one. Go within, tell no one. Go within and do what? Go within and recognize and acknowledge the true source of your power to manifest and create your reality or your life experience or your experience of reality, right? Instead of giving credit to the 3D personality and telling others about what you're manifesting and creating, tell no one but go. When you do this, you close yourself off from your true source. When you do anything but tell no one, right? If you start giving credit to the 3D self, if you start telling others, when you do this, you close yourself off from your true source. That's why Jesus was giving that warning, right? You go from being aligned with your source to not being aligned, to now in that lower state of consciousness from a 3D standpoint, starting to tell others, oh, I manifested this, or giving credit to yourself, the 3D you, right? Instead, go within and give credit there. Go within and close the door and see your Father in secret, right? This is what Scripture is getting at. So let's hit this a little bit more. And he gave the orders not to tell anyone. But the more he ordered them, the more widely they continued to proclaim it. This is Mark 7:36. He's talking about his disciples, right? The more he warned them. Remember, you're playing all the parts. So the more you struggle with that 3D you, of trying not to think something or trying not to do something, the more you do it, the more you think it. Right? So you've got to rise in consciousness, right? The more he gave those orders, the more widely they continue to tell them. That's the disciples of the undisciplined mind when left to the whims of the 3D personality. That's all we're saying here. When you leave it to the whims of the 3D personality and you're not rising to that higher knowing, to that higher you, then you're left to more thoughts. More thoughts of doubt and fear start coming in, right? The more you try to control it from the lower state of consciousness, the worse it gets. That's the laws of polarity and the law of balance. And you've noticed this, right? The more you talk about it, the more you try to control it, the worse it gets. Why? Because you're closing yourself off more from your power and your source. The more that happens, right? The more you struggle with that, you're closing yourself off. Right? This is the disciples going out and talking about the miracles of Jesus, right? The undisciplined mind attracting thoughts that feels like I've got to talk. The 3D personality wants to tell of their power, of this power and what they're doing. Do you see what's going on here? It's a lower mind that's driving that, not your higher mind. Your higher mind just goes in and bees it and is it and doesn't feel any attraction or any motivation to go and tell others of what they're creating. Because you are reality, right? This is big here. So let's keep going. And but he went out and began to proclaim it freely. This is Jesus. And to spread the news around to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, but stayed out in unpopulated areas and they were coming to him from everywhere. Remember, Jesus is representing all your states of consciousness. So it's saying Jesus, this is Jesus from thinking more in terms of, this is you thinking more in terms of a 3D you. You begin to proclaim it freely and to spread the news around. You were talking more about what you're manifesting and what you're doing, to such an extent that you could no longer publicly enter a city, meaning a state of consciousness. Cities represent states of consciousness, right? So that meaning you're now closed off from certain higher states of consciousness. Just like Jesus says, to such an extent he could no longer publicly enter a city, could no longer rise to that higher consciousness. Now because you're disconnected from source when you go out publicly telling everybody about what you're doing. Do you hear this? That's why the great secret of the secret is to keep it a secret. Right? He could no longer publicly enter a city, which represents a state of consciousness. Right? And then it says he stayed out in unpopulated areas. Unpopulated by what? People. But what do people represent? Thoughts. Right? All of those. So he tried to get to try to move from those negative thoughts or from those negative influences. But they were coming to him from everywhere, but they were still coming. He was attracting more. Closed off from source. Undesired thoughts come from every direction. They're contagious. Even as you try to move away from them. That's big, right? For he had healed many. This is what Scripture says. For he had healed many with the result that all those who had afflictions pressed around him. Mark 3:10. All those that had afflictions, I mean all of those afflictions or all those people represent thoughts, unwanted thoughts, negative thoughts, thoughts of doubt, thoughts of fear, thoughts of unfulfillment. They all pressed against them to get healed. Right? All those thoughts are coming up. All those opposing thoughts, right, have now pressed around him. Wow, that's big. So I don't want to jinx it, or I should tempt fate. This is what my client was bringing up last night. This is how a lot of people talk about this. But why is that? Why is it that we feel that when we talk about something before it has actually manifested, before it happens, if we talk about a wish, a desire, a dream, we feel that we're jinxing it, or we feel that we're tempted fate. What's really going on? Well, really what's going on are the laws of the universe. You're invoking the law of polarity, the law of rhythm, right? The law of balanced forces coming in to seek balance, right? But you do, but you do anyway. Even though you don't want to jinx it, even though you don't want to tempt fate, you do it anyway. Why? Because you're moved by the pendulum. Remember the pendulum of thoughts and the unconscious, of lower conscious thought, unconscious or subconscious thought. Then you invoke the laws of polarity, the laws of opposites, the law of rhythm and balanced forces to come in and knock you on your butt as you wallow in non-fulfillment, blaming it on a jinx or bad luck or fate. Do you see that? You go, oh, I spoke too soon, or I jinxed it, or you're superstitious about it. It's just the laws of the universe working perfectly, right? Coming in to find balance where you have created an imbalance, right? You are now allowing doubt to come in. You're now allowing fear to come in, right? So it's not about fate or jinx or bad luck or superstition. It's all you meddling in the creative process or God's work. You're just meddling in you're interrupting the creative process as you start talking about it before it's actually manifested or before you have it in your reality. Right? You're not jinxing the process. It's not bad luck. You're just meddling in God's work. Do you see that? You're meddling in the creative process. You're not allowing the creative process to come to fruition, right? So remember, it's not you. So when you're talking about it from the 3D you, is you wanting to take credit for you wanting to talk about it. It's not coming from a higher power. That higher power doesn't need to talk about it to anybody, right? So let's hit this. It's the proverbial I spoke too soon, right? Remember, you are transmuting potential energy into form when you're creating, right? With your focus with your focused thought or your imagined end, right? You're transmuting that energy. But so if you're talking about it, well, this is going on, where's your focus? Your focus is no longer on the imagined end. It's focused on telling people about your desires, telling others about what you're manifesting. And now you're no longer manifesting it, quote, imagining it or creating it, right? And now on the physical plane, when this takes place, on the physical plane, this takes time, this transmutation of energy, of potential energy into form as you focus on your thought or that imagined end. That's why you have to continually return to it, right? On the physical plane, this takes, quote, time, but what does that really mean? It really means intensity, right? Because there is no time. It takes intensity of your thinking, intensity of your imagining from your desired end. So really, what are you taking away from? You're taking away from the intensity of your imaginal act. You're taking away from your intensity of that focused thought or that focused state. You're squandering your energy. You're squandering your focus when you're talking about it. That's why Jesus said, go and tell no one. Right? You're squandering it. You're squandering that power. Remember, the Sabbath is the time to be still, to be quiet and know. Tell no one means rest in the silence of that fulfillment. Rest in that silence, right? You're speaking about it on the physical plane weakens the mental imaginal plane, weakens the imaginal image, right? The creation on the unseen plane, right? The more you speak about it, the less focused you are on the mental image, right? And the more unwanted or undesired thoughts come. Do you see that? What happens there? It's the same thing of that expression, you're taking your eye off the ball. Right? So you can't possibly get there. That's when unwanted thoughts come in. You're leaving the door open. Right? Remember, I am the door, I am the way. You're leaving the door open for unwanted thoughts to seed doubt. Like others will seed doubt, but that's subconscious. Remember, all thoughts exist. So now that triggers doubt in you, right? Wow, that's big. So tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. So Jesus tells us here, really in a quite powerful way, that this is the reason why he gives the message of tell no one. Tell no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. This is where it's clear. This is where he gives the reason why. Why? Because the Son of Man represents that potential within you, right? That potential I am, that potential Christ, right? It represents the God in you, but the potential, right? Because remember, there's a Son of Man and then there's a Son of God. The Son of God is that perfect image of God, is that ideal consciousness. It's the absolute consciousness. As a Son of Man, you have that potential in you. So until you rise, in other words, from the dead, until you rise as you leave that old state, as you die to the old you rise to the new you. But until you rise to that new you don't want to go talking about it. You don't want to go squandering your focus, squandering your concentration, squandering your imaginal end. Your focus on that, right? Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. In other words, has risen from that old state, right? From that, let the dead bury the dead, right? You're rising from that old state. You're occupying that new version of yourself. You're occupying that new reality. So don't tell no one until you're occupying that new reality. Tell no one until you're in that new version of yourself and that you're seeing the world from that new version of yourself. But then here's the paradox. You don't have to tell anyone. You're not going to need to, because you are that new version of yourself. You no longer have that ego need to announce it, to tell, hey, this is cool. Look what I'm doing. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me, the ego. You no longer have that desire. Telling others before you have assumed, and occupied the new version of yourself in reality and have manifested your wish or fulfillment in 3D exposes your consciousness to their beliefs, their doubts and expectations, and also other in mass consciousness, right? Thereby causing your 3D personality to say, prove it. Your ego starts saying to you, okay, now that you told them, you prove it. Now you start feeling anxiety, attachment, doubt, and fear. That's what we're really talking about here, guys. So let's just take it one step further. Speaking about it to others is not the same thing, and this is what I hit last night with my client, as speaking it into creation, with your inner speech, living in the end, matching your inner speech to your imaginal end. That's different. Speaking about to others comes from your 3D personality of wanting to say, look at me, look what I'm doing, look what I'm creating, right? Here, that scatters your energy and focus, and that creates doubt. But speaking from within, or creating that inner speech, and even outer speech, speaking into creation, even affirming out loud, that's okay. Concentrates your focus on the mental image of fulfillment and invokes conviction. Do you see the difference? This inner speech and even outer speech, the new story, talks it into creation. You're talking yourself into your new life story, into your new version of yourself, into your new reality. It invokes conviction. Speaking about it to others, what you're manifesting, or about the new life that you're going to have, scatters your energy and focus and creates doubt. And this is what Matthew 6:6 says. But when you pray, go into your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you openly, right? As they say. Look at the words here. When you pray, in other words, when you imagine your desire, and when you focus on your wish fulfilled, when you assume it, when you see it, when you confirm it, when you tell the inner story about it, you go in the inner room within. You close the door to the outside world. So you're not going to be telling them about that. You're closing the door. You're doing this in secret. You're praying to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret, what you have done in secret, will reward you. Very clear here, right? Watch, and this is what Proverbs 4:23 says, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life. Your heart guards everything. Your heart guards your desires. It guards your wishes, right? So guard your wishes, guard your desires. The secrets of the heart should be guarded, right? And nurtured from within. It's really between you and God, between you and your higher self, between you and you. You with the small y and you with the capital Y, or yourself and yourself. The self with the small s and the self with the capital S. That's all that matters. That's how to keep your desires and wishes to yourself. And that's why. I am your host, Tom Karen, and this is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button, like and share our videos. That's how we get our message out. You can follow us on Facebook at Be Something Wonderful, on Instagram and Twitter at Tom Karen. We have a Facebook group called the Be Something Wonderful Ambassadors. It's an open group, so you can join, but it's private. So it's not open to the public, and your comments and your insights are not shared to the public, but they're only shared among you and among those in the group. So it's a pretty cool group. You can ask for insight and guidance. You also can give insight and guidance and share stories. Also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Tom Karen, or just go to our website anytime at tomkaren.com or besomethingwonderful.com, where all that information is there and more. Creators, more content also coming out on the membership channel. There'll be a new video in the queue lined up for that. And there's a link in the comments section if you want to check it out and if you want to join it. Until next time, with great love and great light and infinite gratitude, this is Tom. See you soon.